Hello, everyone. This is Pastor Dave Stewart of Destiny Preparation Church, welcoming you once again. Glad to have you here with us here at Destiny Preparation Church. I hope that you're doing okay. This is a celebration weekend, 4th of July weekend. A lot of parties, a lot of celebration going on. And it really is kind of a mixed bag this year, I know, for a lot of people, because there's been so much going on. A lot of questions and challenges in terms of, are we really a part of this society? Are we the proper part of it we're supposed to be? There's a lot of questions, a lot of challenges going on. There have been a lot of protests, a lot of rioting, the way people have been treated. We've gone from one extreme to the next, from the left to the extreme right. And Lord, I'm praying, and we should be praying right now that God would bring us together, because I believe the only one that gets a benefit out of this is the devil. The only one that gets satisfaction out of what's happening is the devil. The rest of us are just trying to survive it, and perhaps some are trying to win it, but that's a whole nother ballgame. So we want to stay in prayer right now through this time. We want to pray that God will be with us, that God is going to take us through. If you're celebrating this weekend, be careful, be wise. Don't forget that we still have things going on around us, and many of us have been impacted by COVID-19 in many different ways, either personally or through family and friends. This is nothing we want to put on anyone else. So we're praying and we're believing and we're being wise in what we do. And I encourage you to do the same. Now we're getting ready for services here. Definitely next weekend we will be having services, Lord willing, here at the church. And I do invite you to come. If you're still not ready to come, assemble. And we're going to be prepared, by the way. We have a lot of special things that we've put in place to help keep us safe and protected while we're here. We're sharing that with all of our members, and you're invited to come and be a part of it as well. We've restricted some of the seating and access, etc. We have a lot of things in order that are needed for that. That's why we've been taking our time and preparing. So we invite you to come and be connected up with us, because you need to be connected. If you're not ready yet to step into the church, then I invite you to join us still on our live feed. We continue our live stream service on Sundays on our Facebook page, Destiny Preparation Church on Facebook. At 11:30 a.m. is our service. Come and be connected with us. You can send messages, you can put in comments, you can give us your feedback if the Lord has blessed you, if the word or the worship has blessed you, or perhaps you've given your life to Christ. We want to hear about it. So connect up with us this weekend here at Destiny Preparation Church. Now I'm going to take you to the Word of God, and this is a continuation of what we've been sharing in and out over the past several weeks. We've been talking about what it takes to change the atmosphere. And when we shared this sermon several months ago, it did not have nearly the relevance that it has now. It did have relevance, but I believe it was a foreshadowing, because in the midst of what's going on and what we've been experiencing, we need the church to rise up to be able to change the atmosphere. So this morning I want to talk to you about the voice of the church. I want you to understand that because of who we are in God, because of who God has ordained us to be, we have power in what we speak. And I pray that this will inspire you and inspire us all as churches, as people of God, children of God, to come together, because our power is in our unified voice. And I pray that you're going to be a part of that. Don't forget to connect up with us this weekend. Celebrate, be careful, don't be crazy. We'll look forward to seeing you next week here at Destiny. God bless you. Have a great weekend.
We still have to let's look for a moment at the reality of the time that we're dealing with right now. And many people are asking this question: what is going on? What is going on? What's happening? What does all this mean? Many people are trying to put things in perspective. I've even been contacted by different people trying to understand, is this the end time? Is this Revelation? What's happening right now? Where do we stand? What is happening in this hour? We are truly experiencing a worldwide phenomenon like we have never seen in our lifetime. There have been things that have happened in the past which have been very powerful and detrimental, but never have we seen something so contagious move so rapidly through the entire world. Oftentimes, there are things that happen in regions, and you hear about this happening over there, and something happening in this country, or even some things happening in the South, or this part of the country itself, or the world. But it's amazing. It has been amazing to be able to sit back and watch the transition all the way from China, all the way across the entire world. Watch it progressively moving and moving and moving and impacting and infecting all the way here to the United States. This has been an amazing thing to experience, but a very detrimental thing. Scary in a lot of ways. fearful in a lot of ways. The anticipation, the watching what's going on right now and what is still to come. This is an amazing thing. We've never seen anything like this in our lifetime. There have been other things that have been, some even more deadly, but they've not spread like this. Ebola, just a few years ago, that was happening over in Africa, was a very, very deadly thing. And we had a couple of cases that actually made it to the United States, but it was contained. It did not spread the same way. This has been a phenomenal thing to see, and even to what is left to come. And I think the most impactful thing to all of us is that this is closer to home than anything we've ever experienced in our time. To be able to see what's happening right around us, to talk about the stories of our own family members who are doing this or experiencing that. My own daughter was tested this week in New York City and believes that she received the virus. And so many others. We've had experiences where we are trying to help people and move people before things close and make sure people have what they need. We've had to think ahead of this in so many ways, even in the business world, trying to figure out how to protect people and keep people safe and what we can and can't do. We've had to think and be creative about questions that we've never even imagined before, like having services without a congregation there. You heard LeBron James the other day saying, no, man, if there's no people out there in the stands, I'm not playing. But tunes change quick because things have been happening at such a dramatic pace like we've never seen before. What is going on? What is this that we're seeing? What's happening in the world right now? It has to cause us, particularly those who are spiritually minded, to ask the question, not only what are we seeing, but what's happening right now. So from a scientific perspective, you can look at the things that are going on and you can put a lot of things together surrounding the logic of it all. And a lot of people in the science world, I'm sure, they haven't talked about it much yet, but would consider this to be an evolutionary aspect, a virus that has evolved and continues to evolve. It's called the novel corona-19 or coronavirus, because it is unique, it is different from other viruses that we've seen. We've seen a lot of different types of viruses and we've learned to resist them, but this one is different than some of the other strands. And that's why it's having such an impact, because the resistance is not out there for this particular strand. Some would say it's an evolutionary aspect. I was talking to a young man the other day that was talking about how things like antibiotics, will cause 99. They talk about the things that you spray and kill germs. They say they're 99.9% effective. It's the 0.1% that it doesn't kill, which is dangerous. Because if you kill out the 99.9 and the 0.1 still lives and grows, now you have something that is more dangerous than the other 99.9%. And what are you going to kill that with? Because it didn't work what you had before. These viruses tend to evolve, and some people would suggest that humanity has had a good portion of responsibility in that, in terms of pesticides and things that we've done, the antibiotics that we created and taken, and trying to make things better. We cause the weaker viruses to die and the stronger ones to get stronger. It's an amazing thing to consider from a scientific perspective how these things all fit and how they're all happening. We've talked to many for the past few years, many times about global warming and how the world is changing and how things seem to be happening around us. Is it man's fault? Did we do it? Or what? Is it just natural selection? There's some scientific assumption to the fact that the world has a natural tendency to balance itself out. And so when it becomes overpopulated and when things become too dense, like forests, there tends to be natural fires, not all formed by man, but it'll cause certain areas to burn out so that they start over again fresh. And so is this just a natural scientific phenomena that's happened, or is it something different? From a spiritual perspective, we would look at this same situation and look for something inside of it deeper than just what we see on the outside. And from a spiritual perspective, one of the things that we would point to is the element of sin in this world. The fact that the Bible shows us that from the very beginning when sin came in under Adam and Eve, a corruption aspect began to come in as well into the world. And that corruption was not only in the heart, but it was in the physical. I shared earlier in Romans chapter 8 where it says that the whole world, the creation itself, groans right now because all of creation is impacted by what's happened in the children of God having lost their place of authority in the world. When the devil deceived Adam and Eve, he took authority from them over this world. Dominion that was ours now belonged to him, and evil and sin crept into the world, and it has progressed worse and worse and worse. Things that used to be kind of bad before have gotten worse now and worse. We've seen the evolution, if you will, of corruption and destruction in the world in so many different ways. And even as we have naturally resisted and fought to try and overcome them, it just progresses in the wrong direction. Sin, spiritually, we would suggest that sin has caused this world to change and continue to change in a path and an element that goes against the will of God. As we've looked at the natural of our people and how people have turned away from God, forgotten about God, put God outside of their thinking and their rationale, to a point where we see a generation like never before that has moved away from God and godliness and decided that those things don't matter anymore. Decided that what they think and what they feel is really what it's all about. And that really is how we judge and understand and evaluate the world. There has been a transition further and further away from God. And as a result of that, we see a lack of response of God's people. Because in the midst of this, with the social pressures that have gone on, with the influence of not saying anything negative about what everybody wants to do or think, the voice of the church has become quieter and quieter over time. We say things, but we say them subtly. We say them behind the scenes. We don't want to lose our nonprofit status, our tax-exempt status. We don't want to make the wrong people mad. We don't want to have people outside of our churches rallying. And so we've kept the word internal, and we've kept our voices quieter in this time. And so while so much has been going on outside, the voice that can speak change now because of the power of God through us has become quieter and quieter. And when we see in the Bible that when the people of God begin to either move away or stop serving God, the presence of God tends to lift, and the covering of protection that God offers begins to lift as well. God lifting his grace. Some people won't believe this. Some people won't understand this. But this is spiritually the pattern that we see over and over again, not just in biblical times, but even beyond biblical times. When people serve God and then turn away from God under the presence and power of a mighty God, they're lifted. Even nations are lifted. And as they turn away, the grace of God lifts and things begin to change, things begin to fall apart, and there is ultimate destruction. One thing that I'm always reminded of is that throughout the scriptures, we see that God never allows such a situation to happen without there first being a warning. Over and over again in the Old Testament to God's people, he warned them, he reminded them of what their responsibilities were to him, of who he was. He sent prophets to them. He warned them of what would happen. He allowed them to have near misses. There was one time when the Assyrian army came right up to the edge of the children of Israel, and in the midst of that they prayed, 2 Chronicles chapter 20, and the Bible caused that whole army to be destroyed, the greatest army in the world at that time. All of a sudden turned on itself, fell away, and went back. That was a warning, because years later they came back, and the people did not turn to God, and the Assyrians overtook them. We need to understand that what we're seeing from a spiritual perspective speaks to the church being out of position in terms of our responsibilities to God, in terms of our dominion over the earth and our ambassadorship to represent God on the earth. Saints, I have to say that we may feel like we've had church, we may feel like we've kept our presence with God, but we haven't done our job quite right, because in the midst of all that we've done inside the church, we forgot about going outside the church. We've forgotten. I've said it here in our church many times. One responsibility that we can never forget about is that we are responsible to make other disciples. Go ye therefore into all the world and teach all nations. We're looking at a time of pestilence. What we see right now, by definition, in Webster's dictionary, pestilence is a contagious or infectious epidemic, or pandemic in this case, worldwide, disease that is virulent, which means extremely severe, virulent and devastating. Pestilence is a contagious or infectious epidemic disease that is virulent and devastating. What we're seeing right now, the way we've seen it happen across the entire world, is an unprecedented, powerful, devastating, infectious disease that has taken on the entire world, and we have had nothing to stop it. Biblically, when we see the word pestilence portrayed in the Bible, I want you to get this. It is portrayed as a punishment from God. Everywhere it's described and defined, it comes from God. It's a punishment, and it's given not by the devil, but by God. Pestilence was ordained everywhere in the Bible, cited by God. God says, I will send pestilence. I will do this. God does it so as a reminder to those of who he is and how we have turned or failed away from him. Even the children of Israel, when they prayed to God as they created the temple, they said, Lord, if you send pestilence, and we come back to this place to pray, Lord, hear our prayer. God responded in 2 Chronicles chapter 7 to that prayer in chapter 6, saying the same thing. If I send pestilence and my people come and pray and turn, I will hear. Pestilence comes from God. He's used it against those who oppose his will, as he did with the Egyptians, the 10 plagues that led up ultimately until Passover and their leaving, the escape of the children of Israel out of Egypt. He used it against those who turned away from him, like the children of Israel, reminding them that they need to come back. And he used it as a punishment of disobedience against King David, who had numbered the people when he ordered him not to, instructed him not to, and therefore he caused a pestilence to come upon the people. One day that was bringing death throughout. It swept across the people in one day until David, get this, until David offered a sacrifice ahead of where the pestilence was spreading. One day across the entire nation of Israel, it was spreading. And the sacrifice of David caused the pestilence to stop. Saints, keep that in mind. We don't like to believe that God would punish those he loves. Some people have a hard time believing that God would curse his people. Some people have a hard time believing that God would send people to hell. What kind of God of love is this? But we need to understand that God does not punish just to destroy, but God chastises in order to regain attention and to turn us around. So if this is a pestilence that comes from God, then the reason for it coming is as a reminder and a warning to the world of who he is. But I want to ask you this question today. Who is it that God is talking to? Is God talking to the world as a whole? Or is God talking to the church? Who is it that God's trying to get the attention of today? If he's speaking to the world, he speaks to the world to know, hey, there is a God. But when the world sees it, they don't see the connection. They don't understand unless somebody makes the connection for them. Romans chapter 10, verse 14, the New Living Translation version says, but how can they call on him if they have not put their trust in him? And how can they put their trust in him if they have not heard of him? And how can they hear of him unless someone tells them? So for the world to see pestilence right now might be an awakening, and it might be an opportunity for the ears to open, to listen, but somebody's got to tell them. Now, if God is speaking to the church, then the message to the church is, church, it's time to be the church. It's time for us to be what we're called to be. It's time for us to take back dominion and authority instead of watching and waiting and seeing what everybody else is going to do and even waiting for God to do it. God put us in dominion on the earth to speak his word, to declare, to release the voice of God in this world. And then God would follow through us. We are the ambassadors of God in this world. And so if the message is to the church, the message is, church, it's time to be the church. Not just in buildings. Isn't it amazing that God has put us out of buildings? Notice I said God, not people, not authorities. God has put us out of buildings. He's put us in places where we have to connect in other ways. But our voice needs to stretch beyond the buildings. Just like in Jerusalem in the time of Pentecost, our voice needs to get outside of the walls and it needs to stretch into other places. No matter what situation we walk into, whatever store you go into, no matter who is hungry or in need, no matter what situation is happening at work, it's time now for the voice of the church to rise, and it's time for the church to be the church. We have to tell the world what it is that's going on. Because if the voice of the church is silenced, there can be no change. I want you to understand today that the power of the church comes from the voice of the church. When we speak, we release. When we declare, we open up a window to heaven for the things that come forth from God. When we are silent, power of God is withheld. Because we have not spoken it. We have not declared it. We're not declaring our word or our will, but we are to declare the words of God. We are to speak with a voice that speaks what God has to say. When our voice stays inside the walls, it's silent to the world. And that's a demonic strategy. We've been talking about it for several years now, to get the church to be silent, to see what happens, to watch and say nothing, to see people turn and say nothing. Just came to me, if you know the story of Eli, the prophet in the Old Testament. He had 2 sons. And the issue was that his sons were not living the way that they were supposed to live. And they were supposedly representing God and representing the church as priests. But they were living all kind of wrong ways and sinful ways. And Eli would say nothing. And as a result of that, not only did Eli's sons die, but Eli paid the price as well. If the church is silent, then the church is accountable. We cannot just watch what the world does, because the world is our responsibility. We have been given dominion over it. And unless we speak, we are being Eli, and we are held accountable. I declare this is awakening to the church right now. The church can't stay silent any longer. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 21, the first part of it says, death and life are in the power of the tongue. It's not even just what we think or have in our hearts, what we speak. The power is in what we speak. And church, I declare to you right now that everywhere you are, wherever home you're in, it's time for us to learn how to speak to the devil. How to speak against the things that are coming in our lives. Don't be silent. Don't just think it. Declare it. Speak to the devil around you. Because when the church begins to declare as one the things of God, the power of the presence of God shows up. That's the power we have as the church. We can call on the presence of God and he will come. And whether we're gathered together 2 or 3, or whether we're gathered together electronically across the world, when we begin to call on the name of the Lord, God will show up, and the presence of God shows up with it. We have to declare it. We have to release our voice. When you begin to open into the atmosphere, the power and the things of God, the devil will have to move. The devil will have to move, because he will not stay where the presence of God is. Saints of God, it's time for more than just a service. It's time for more than just coming and watching what happens in a church. It's time to be the church. And the church must open its mouth and declare its voice. The voice of the church has to be released in this time. Matthew chapter 6 and 10. So many of us Christians, wherever we are, speak these words. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Verse 6:10 says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. The church has to open up its mouth and declare, Lord, thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. We have to release the voice and the power of God on the earth through our voice. Saints, wherever you are, I want you to declare right now, thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Speak it out. Declare it where you are, in your homes. Speak it out in your grocery stores. Speak it on your jobs. Speak it in the hospitals. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. We are releasing the power and the presence of God, even against a pestilence that seems that cannot be overcome. And I believe that if the church rises up right now to speak the word of God, that the angel of death can be halted right where he is. There can be a miraculous change in what's taking place right now if the church will open up its mouth and declare with its voice the presence and the power of God.